I built a medieval tavern where people can rent rooms, order food, and above all, we can use it for profit. At first, we had a solid stash of food and supplies to keep us going for a while. We stumbled on the perfect spot to set up our new base and a tavern. I threw together a trestle to crank out planks. Velvet was in charge of building our base, while Ben and Andrew were out chopping trees. I figured that we should plant some rice. No way we are hurting those cute little animals for food. Not yet anyway. For now, we were all crammed together on these junky beds. It was a lunchtime, and I didn't really make it to building tables, but that was alright. Andre got a head start on planting because, let's be real, we're gonna need a ton of food not only for ourselves, but also for our guests. And I must admit that these beds look rough, not gonna lie, but it's medieval times, so it's better than sleeping on dirt. Then we found out that Velvet was 72 years old. Yeah, 72. I'm pretty sure people didn't make it that long back in the day, but maybe she's built different. Once the tavern was finally done, I threw in some lights and a research table because we need tech advancements, even in medieval times. The research options were kinda wild, but I focused on rusting storage first. And we finally got around to upgrading everyone's beds and laying down some decent flooring. Right when I was working on that, we got our first guests, but there was only one problem: we didn't have any guest beds. So we had to turn them away, but there was an option to ignore any visitors until we are gonna have guest beds, so I chose the one. We just needed to build our medieval hotel as soon as possible. I set up some counters where we're gonna sell our goods and even added a register. The whole place was starting to feel like a legit medieval business. We also built a kitchen and a storage room to keep our food stocked up, though we needed stone blocks for the kitchen table, so we put a stone cut in place as a project. It'd also be great to add some recreational activities for our guests, cause a little entertainment goes a long way and it have a positive effect on overall hospitality. Once we finished the storage research, we moved on to furniture next. Then, out of nowhere, we got jumped by a wild hare. Ben handled it, there was no problem. We got some shelves set up in storage for rice, and speaking of food, the rice was finally ready to harvest. With this amount of food, we'd be eating good for a while, and the kitchen was ready to go, so it was time to cook up something better than raw veggies. Velvet was really into playing these games, and she was quite happy. And we finally made some simple food. Nothing fancy, but it was just the beginning. Wood was running low, so I sent out Ben to grab more. I also kept an eye on our food stockpile, because with no fridge, it'd be waste to cook too much food because it spoils after 4 days, and I didn't want to waste our resources. I started working on a medieval inn, and it was finally a time to turn this place into a proper business. But then an enemy archer rolled up, looking to mess with our peaceful little tavern. We took up defensive positions and waited for the right moment to strike. He had decent skills, but that chemical thing could have been a problem, so we finished him off and moved on. The next day we got most of the main construction done and started decorating, throwing in some furniture. I also decided to expand the farm because once we had guests, we'd need way more food. Not to mention that we could hire some extra hands. We also started researching brewing, cause beer is the key to any good tavern. Then we sort of acquired our first worker. He was a former space marine, super hardworking and quick sleeper, basically a killing machine, and we definitely find a place for him. A nearby caravan stopped by, so I sold some loot, including Psycasts, just for a safety measure. And the medieval hotel was finally done, and man, it looked way better than our barracks. We should have built separate rooms earlier. But whatever. For now, I set the price at 10 silver, and you might say that it is cheap, but we needed to build a reputation first. We planted some hops, which are essential for brewing beer, And we also got a quest to save an Empire friend from a rock hare. I accepted it for Andre. It was time to build proper rooms for our workers, and that way we would improve their standard of living and increase their efficiency, so it's a win-win. After completing the quest, we even threw a ceremony for Andre. It was a bit dull, but he got his first title, so that was cool. We put focus points in the protector tree. We put some furniture in the new rooms, but we suddenly ran out of planks. Because of that, Andrew had to sleep in the open with no walls, but we'd make it up for him later on. Rooms were done, but we needed fortifications so that our guests would feel safe. So I built some walls. That should be enough for now. I also decided to research textile because we needed clothes. And I just noticed that Scorch was an addict, which was pretty problematic. At least we didn't have any drugs lying around. But he was gonna be in withdrawal a lot. Velvet was worked on fortifications until everyone crashed through the night except Andre. Dude was the most loyal worker here. We finally built a brewery and started brewing beer. I also placed a fermenting barrel next to it. Andre finally found some free time to meditate. But of course, we got attacked. I sent Ben to deal with it, and it was a perfect timing because we got our first guest, a noble from House Some Boys. She picked a room and passed out, and it was quite convenient since the tavern was quite a mess, so I asked Scorch to clean it. I also adjusted work hours to 8-hour shifts, only because we weren't paying for overtime. We finally finished building walls, but we still needed a medieval kill box. But that could wait though. Our guest didn't like her room, which was kind of disappointing, but I just needed to clean it. After that, it was still a bit dull, but that was acceptable. In the meantime, some people tried to rob our tavern, but unfortunately for them, a caravan happened to be there and they just demolished them. Velvet started gathering cotton, but we needed a spinning wheel for textiles, so I quickly set up a space for our little workshop. And in the future it would also be a smithy. Our guest was satisfied with our service, and this was the most important for us right now. And the spinning wheel was set up and ready to go, and soon enough we'd be able to make our own clothes. But before that, we need to research tailoring. And I briefly noticed that Scorch insulted our guest, which wasn't nice and could harm our reputation. Though I was certain that once we started selling beer, our guests would overlook some of our sort of missteps. Later on, I found out there was a hospitality bar, which essentially represents our score, how well we serve our guests. We already made our first batch of beer, but it's gonna take a while before it's completed. We also got a quest to host a member of House Some Boys. We had some space to spare, so I accepted it for the reputation boost and assigned him one of our rooms. And we got 100 score in hospitality, which is amazing. They also promised to visit us again, which will help grow our client base. Plus, we received a gift. I checked on Ryan to see what he could do, but apparently he was just here on vacation, sort of. But while we were at it, a boom rat went berserk. We quickly killed it, but in the process, Ben got severely burned. Andrew healed him and used a healing spell so he'd recover faster. We had enough food for our future guests, so I decided to add 2 more rooms to our hotel. And I finally figured out how to appoint some of my pawns to work in the tavern. I'd been wondering why the last guest didn't order anything. But for now, we should close it, since there are no guests. We set up a tailoring table and ordered some shirts and pants. And Scourge threw a binge party. Well, as long as they are satisfied, I think it's fair to cut them some slack every now and then. Everything was great, except they were eating all the food. The Scourge started insulting everyone because of his drug withdrawal. And the funniest part was that it happened during the party, so as a result, everyone got insulted. And to make things even worse, they started fighting each other. Thankfully, they were all okay in the end, and he calmed down and went to sleep. And the food was almost gone thanks to this fruitful party, so we needed to cook more. And Velvet was finally finished tailoring a shirt, and I gave it to Scorch. And the two new rooms were ready for guests, aside from the rocks which I still needed to haul. And there was a scholar caravan, and as I later found out, they were selling blueprints. They only had the noble maze blueprint, but I couldn't research it without the military maze schematics, so I was reluctant to buy it. And I finally decided to build some shelves in our main building because I was tired of storing our loot in the floor. I also wanted to build a furnace for our smithy, but I didn't have any stone blocks left, so I made stone cutting our next research priority. But before that could happen, some visitors arrived. I opened the tavern and cleaned it up, though they didn't have much silver, so I doubted they'd buy anything. I put all my herbs on Scorch because he was the face of our tavern. I also cooked some meals since we didn't have much food in storage, and I found and put up this wooden sign on our tavern to give it a more medieval feel, and I decided to extend the shifts, and our guests were quite satisfied with their stay. They even bought some food, and our hospitality score was maxed out. Our tavern was starting to look like the real tavern, with guests enjoying their stay. We sold some food again, and had already made 22 silver in profit, and there was no shortage of new guests. And while some of the guests weren't in the best mood, I had something to lift their spirits. We finally made some beer, but then I found out that one of our employees was sneaking beer while I wasn't looking. It wasn't hard to figure out who it was. It was him, Scourge. I quickly updated his drug policy because he was gonna drink all of our products before we could even sell it. Then he went on his shift while being drunk, which was at the very least unprofessional. After a while, the guests from House on Boys started leaving with a satisfaction score of 72, which wasn't great. One of the reasons for that was Scourge, who was drunk all the time. Still, they left us a gift, which was nice. We still had one guest, so I kept the shop open. Focusing on the positives, we finally built a furnace to smelt some metal. I also upgraded our rooms a bit by adding a table to each one. Another 100 hospitality score, which would boost our attractiveness to future guests. We found out there was a steel mine nearby with around 200 steel, and I didn't want to miss that opportunity. I prepared a caravan with Ben and Andre, while Velvet and Scourge were in charge of protecting our tavern. But as soon as they left, we were attacked by some bandits. We took up defensive positions. But he fell, and the bandit was trying to get away with him. In the last moment, I managed to catch up to him. I quickly rescued our guy and started patching him up, but they would take ages to fully heal him. Velvet was also severely injured. I decided to tune our caravan back because we couldn't deal with that on our own. To make things even worse, our guest got plague, and at this moment it was just too much. Velvet felt unconscious, though she quickly waked up, but she was unable to do anything. My decision by calling our caravan back was the right one, because without them we would lose both of our pawns. Andre quickly healed both of them. They were in dire straits, but they would leave. We managed to save our guest. He developed immunity with 98% of infection. That was a close call. Little by little, things went back to normal. Velvet and Scorch recovered, and our tavern was yet again open for new guests and challenges that would appear on our way.